Greetings and salutations, all you beautiful people, and welcome to another episode of Art of the Beholder, a show dedicated to all things eclectic in the world of art, where we do deep dives into deep cuts and help you understand why damn things matter. I'm your host, Novo Day, and today we're going to be talking about art in television, focusing on HBO's dark comedy, Barry. To hash it out, we're joined by our favorite assassin. That's right. Miss Marie the Miracle Parsons is back with us today. Welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
I want to start the show here. I have had the hardest time finding a lot of people in my orbit that have gotten into Barry. How did you get there?
I agree. I've been having the same experience with that. I don't know. Oh my gosh. I think I was just browsing HBO.
Oh, so it was just complete happenstance. Like you're just like, oh, I guess I'll give this a shot, and then like you fell in love, like Snowball.
Yeah, exactly. It was I mean,
Huh.
I've always enjoyed Bill Hader. I think he's super talented performer. I had no idea he wrote and directed and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I kind of was taking a shot.
And here we are, right? Because yeah, that was my reasoning. So I'm an old soul, if you haven't guessed that yet, and I have always loved and consistently watched Saturday Night Live since I was like a little boy. Like I've always liked comedy and stand up, and I've always gravitated towards sketch comedy, probably the most, and well, I would say number one is stand up. Close second is sketch comedy, and Saturday Night Live has always been kind of a beacon for a lot of the humor and things that I've gravitated towards. And Bill Hader has always been such an underrated gem, not only of that
Yes.
show, but of
Yes.
just of the craft of performing, right?
Absolutely.
So let's tell the good people why. Why are we talking about Barry today? Because just like us kind of talking about getting into the show, there's really nothing quite like Barry.
Mhm.
And I think on the surface, if someone saw the first episode of the first season, they're like, "Oh, this is just I've seen a million shows that are just like this." And that's the beauty of Barry is once you really get into it, you see that it does really, though it has parts that of course overlap with a lot of different kinds of shows like it really is its own animal, an entity.
I agree.
And here's why. So even though I build it as a dark comedy at the top of the show, and it's fascinating because most shows they will start a little more dramatic and maybe through time get a little more silly or comedic, whereas as Barry did the complete opposite. It started as more of a dark comedy, but as it evolved and as it got more and as we went down this rabbit hole, it became more and more serious. It became much more dramatic. And by the end, it was really like an ensemble crime drama with
Right?
deep existential questions. But it was and then again, the beauty of the show again is it was still punctuated by these like elements that it started with, these comedic undertones and accents before concluding. So in essence, it essentially inverted the paradigm of how a lot of shows evolve. And that's Barry. So we're really excited to discuss all things Barry with you guys today. But before we do, of course, we all need a little background. So Barry was created by Alec Berg and, of course, already stated Bill Hader. It premiered on March 25th. 2018. It ran for 4 seasons, consisting of 32 episodes, and concluded on May 28th, 2023. It stars Bill Hader, Stephen Root, Sarah Goldberg, Glenn Fleshler, Anthony Kerrigan, Henry Winkler, Sarah Burns, and Robert Wisdom. It's been nominated for a large number of Primetime and PCA Emmys, winning 9 thus far, as well as an American Film Institute Award, Critics' Choice Award, a Directors and Writers Guild of America Award, a Satellite Award, a Peabody, a Cinema Audio Society Award, Hollywood Critics Association TV Award, and an American Society of Cinematographers Award. So there is a lot to discuss, but before we get there, we're going to take a little break. We'll be right back, guys. This episode is brought to you by novella Adulteration. Follow adult entertainer Jessica Amber Starr as she embarks on a journey that will change her life forever. She not only finds herself in the industry, but figures out a way to transform herself and eventually become reborn. Find out how in Adulteration, which can be found on Amazon in both paperback and ebook, available now. Now back to the show. Okay, Miss Parsons, I have another question for you
Yep.
to start the discussion. I don't know how this isn't more popular. It's actually been billed in kind of the vein of us saying like how we got into it, and more importantly, how we've noticed not a lot of people in our orbit, or the friends in our lives or our families in our life have really got into it, but it's had incredible and critical acclaim, and it's actually been dubbed by some critics as one of the best television series of all time. Are
Yes.
we just early to the party and everyone's late?
Yeah, I think so. This is what my feeling is hearing you talk about it, and I'm gonna sound elitist here.
Ooh, sound elitist.
Oh yeah, but we look at things like on an artistic bent, right? That's why we're talking, and especially, I mean, you're doing these deep. I'm assuming you're the same way when you watch a show and you listen to music. There's some dissection going on. Obviously, you just broke it down, and I think that the average TV watcher, whatever streamer, kind of wants that basic formula. They crave
Mm,
it, and I think that if the
they
boat is
want something
rocked.
easy and not challenging?
Correct, and I think and I'm oh god, I'm totally generalizing, but I think that if the boat is rocked too much and it makes them think a little too much, some people are just like, "No."
Like turned off, like I'm out, like F
Yeah.
this, I'm out.
Because I really think this is, like, great art, like, this is why we're talking about this, and I just don't think that I'm not saying that people don't have the ability to dissect it, I just feel like a lot of people don't want to,
Mm,
and I have another client who a lot of the stuff we a lot of my at work, I'll ask clients, like, "What are you watching?" Or, just small talk, and a
sure.
lot of the stuff she watches is very light.
I get it too. It's just I want I it's we are you're speaking my language, because we're people that want more and want to be challenged.
Yep.
And there's for you good people listening that maybe are not like that. There's nothing wrong with that. Sometimes people just want a little escapism, but I know there's a whole community of people just like us, Miss Parsons, that want more. And I think it's here's my theory, and I'd love to hear yours. I think give it another few years, maybe 5, at the worst 10, and people are gonna be like, "Fucking Barry, man, where's this been
Yeah.
my whole life?"
Exactly. And why is it getting accolades? The people that rate these shows and judge them and blah blah blah, like they're all schooled in dissecting and analyzing and like I'm not saying this is true art compared to the Big Bang Theory or I mean I'm not here to judge that,
I
but
am, it is.
yeah. It is I mean, it is so meaty, there's so much there, and I mean, I feel like I could watch a series multiple times and always find more stuff?
Absolutely. So that's a good segue to tell the good people what it's all about. So from here on out, I'm going to say probably spoilers from here on out. So if you haven't seen the show, go ahead and pause right here. Go see the show, come back. If you don't care, then come down the rabbit hole with us. And if you're somewhere in the middle, maybe you've seen a little bit of it. Tough titties. You're probably going to get spoiled here pretty soon. So we're going to talk narrative first, as we do on these kind of pieces, and we're going to start with story, characters, and of course the arcs of those characters. And if you don't, if you completely don't know nor care, never going to see the show, I'm going to give you guys a quick synopsis. So the basic premise of the show allows us to follow the titular title character, Barry, of course, who we first meet working as a hitman, but stumbles into the world of acting. And he not only falls in love with the craft, but also with one of his fellow classmates. And that is when we see that he finds trouble, when his past catches up with his future. Much like the intro suggested, every season kind of evolved into something more dramatic, and it kind of turned into more of an ensemble cast feature. Like Barry became a little smaller as we got to the fourth season. And I want to kind of start there. I want to begin with the end, so to speak. Because the fourth season, we should tell the good people, if you didn't already know, was almost completely, or at least helmed by Bill Hader. Like every episode was directed. He was the lead writer. Of course, he was starring. He still had the starring role, but we saw so many more of the characters come to the fray. And this fourth season. Not that the first season was not artistic. It was like, by comparison, it was a completely different show in terms of cinematography and feel and look, and the use of psychology and all the tricks that a filmmaker has to bring his vision to life and not only make it something entertaining, but very tastefully artistic.
I had no idea that he wrote and directed that whole season.
Almost, yeah. He would direct like one or two episodes here and there, like the very first episode he directed, and he would also help to write a lot of the shows. But this one he did, like, I mean, of course, that makes it sound like he did it by himself in his like office or something. No, he had editors, and there was a full film crew, just like a movie. But he just helmed. He really took charge, and I feel like it had it by the end. It was a kind of a we had a there was a different vibe.
I agree with that. And it did get, I mean, the whole thing has dark undertones, but it did have a much different vibe. Cuz the season started out with them being in the desert, right? Him and Sally, and or that ended season 3, right?
Ended season 3, yeah, we get a flash forward, and we learned that they are now fugitives on the run. But the most fascinating part is that we learn that they have a little boy together, which completely changes again the paradigm of the narrative of the conflict in the story. It's not only between Barry and Sally against someone like Fuchs and kind of Gene Cousineau in a
Mhm.
way, and of course the the glue that held it all together, NoHo Hank. But it created a brand new element to the already kind of very thick plot by now. You
Correct.
know, and so, why don't we go through talking about the story through the characters? I think that may be an easier way to do it. So let's start, of course, with Barry. I think I'll tee you up with this next segment with a question for you
Mhm.
to narrow. So when we first meet Barry, he's lost. He's looking for his purpose. He talks about that time and time. This is a reoccurring, ongoing motif.
Mhm.
He wants to find his purpose.
Yep.
Do you feel like he ever found his purpose?
Oh boy. I mean, I think
Don't
that,
lose any sleep about it.
right. No, I mean, cuz I think that he found redemption in a weird way. Cuz there was a theme of forgiveness and like redemption, and then in the last season there was like, he became kind of like a born again and vowed he would never kill and all this kind of stuff. So, I mean, I guess it's how what you describe as a purpose. So, I mean, I'd say yes. I think whether it's through this idea of redemption or his son living on and yeah, living a peaceful life, even though Barry was gone. So I'd have to say yes.
I absolutely agree. And you actually, and in terms of my opinion, nailed it on the head when you said his son, because I think his purpose in life was to, and I think a lot of parents feel this way. My purpose in life was to have children and raise them to be the best person they could be. And we get little hints of who his son is as a character, even though we only get to know him through one season. That Sally says this, to him and the audience. He's a good person. So, in my eyes, Barry's purpose was fulfilled when he took all of the chaos of him going through the war and becoming a hitman and trying to change things, only for trouble to find him over and over again. And a lot of his doing, for the record, Barry, and this is a segue to the next thing I wanted to talk about in terms of who Barry is as a character. But in terms of his purpose, it was very much fulfilled through having this wonderful, wonderful little boy that he not only got to raise to be better than him, he got to care for, and then we get to see later that his destiny is fulfilled. I want to switch gears to, yes, the how we know the characters as the audience versus how the characters look in terms of the narrative. Because by the end everything gets, the stories get mixed and messed up, and by the end Barry is glorified as a hero that was like manipulated by Gene, when we all know that Barry was essentially the villain. And I want to start there because he's often billed as like an anti-hero. Like, the more I researched this, the more I saw comparisons to like Breaking Bad and Walter White. And I disagree, actually. I don't think he's a Walter White, because Barry, here's the thing, and I if you're a big Barry fan, anybody listening, you may actually hate this statement. Barry was a villain from the beginning. He was already a hitman. Walter White had to go down this long path to become the evil person he became. Heisenberg, right? In
Mhm.
that example, Barry was already a murderer before we even met him as the audience. He was always the villain.
Yeah, I somehow have more empathy for Barry than Walter White, and I don't know if that's my twisted mind.
And that's the beauty of the writing. So because there's so many comedic things in the show, Barry is written to be likable, and because he's kind of funny and he's kind of a goof, and all these like kind of silly things or absurd things happen around him, he's very sympathetic, and you empathize so much easier than someone like Walter White. But the reality of his character is he was never a hero or an anti-hero. He was already the villain. Just like at the end of season 1, he's like, "Okay, I'm no more killing." And like the season actually ends with him saying like, "Starting now," because he had just killed Gene Cousineau's lover. But here's the kicker: he always would go back to his old behavior. Like, something would happen and he was killing again. He was a hitman again. He would just keep going through the motions and the loops, and he never really could get past that. And by the end, I think it's hinted at, but then of course, spoilers, Gene kills him. So we don't get to see if that would ever actually play out. So that's probably another good question: is do you think he would really turn himself in at the end, or do you think he would do what he's done pretty much through the whole show and reverse action at the last minute?
When I was watching it, I thought he was gonna turn himself in. I thought that was actually gonna happen, and that was gonna be the end of the show, but as we know with Barry, like, that was too predictable. So, but I do think that if it was I think he would have turned himself in, or he would have gotten himself killed in a different way, whether if it was from Gene or, yeah, he could have maybe gone back to that life.
So you think he was going to turn himself in? I respectfully disagree with you, Miss Parsons, because he's been all talk for 4 seasons. He's like, "Okay, I'm going to change," and then he never does.
I think yeah, and I see that, and I agree with that aspect, but I think where my personal view on my sympathy for his character comes from, and the difference, if we're gonna compare him to Walter White, is that Barry had some deep-seated PTSD and mental health issues that unless he was gonna get address
But
those.
that's not an excuse.
Well, no, of course it's not an excuse, but I think I'm saying, I guess coming from my sympathy for the character, that I don't think that he was going back to killing every time because he wanted to. I think that there's just so much fear and like mental disorder in him.
So you think part of his mental illness is to blame? That if he would have got the right help he so desperately deserved, he probably wouldn't have gone through these cycles again?
Absolutely, and the acting was it was sort of a release for, like, the mental health stuff. He was able to outlet and express himself, but the real evil not the real, like, rage inside of him is when, like, he went off on Sally in her office when she had that TV show, and those few times of that pure mental insanity that we saw come out of him, I think that was kind of raging in him the whole time.
Oh, I agree with that.
That's
Oh,
kinda
yeah.
just the vibe now, like, somebody like Walter I guess that's why it's easier for me to sympathize with Barry because I don't think he really wanted a normal life.
And we see glimpses of that too, but I think maybe to make that noodle scratch a little more, why didn't as soon as Gene resurfaced, why didn't he just ignore it then? He could have just still stayed hidden.
But it's once again that fear that was so strong that led him to think if Gene exposes you, all this is going away again. And like he was never gonna be at peace really until he was dead, unless he got like major therapy.
Good interpretation. Let's speed up to talk about Gene now, since we're kind of already talking about the inner dynamics of Barry and Gene Cousineau, who was played by Henry Winkler, and this was throughout the run of for the purposes of this podcast, he was Barry's teacher, his acting dramatic teacher. But my question for you though is, was Gene just in killing Barry at the end?
I mean, I would say I feel like Gene was on the verge of a mental breakdown throughout most of the show. So I think a lot of it was probably prompted by his mental instability. But I feel like there was also a desperation of like, if this guy lives, like we're all at risk. Cause like you said, Barry kept going back and going back. And every time he said he was gonna change, his words really meant nothing. So somebody had to stop him. So yeah, I think I'd have to say yes.
I agree 100%. That's how I interpreted it, because Gene was kind of like the audience in a way. Like we were the only people that could see the real Barry. And even though it seemed like just, time and time again, he's ready to turn a new leaf at the last second or last minute, something would happen and he'd kind of go back to these old behaviors. And Gene, he had to end it. It's just like, where for the people that haven't seen Barry, they may we always use allusions in it and analogies. If you've ever seen the film Uncut Gems with Adam
Yes.
Sandler,
Yeah.
it kind of plays out a lot of the same way. And if you haven't seen that film, I won't ruin it for you. So no spoilers here. But if for those people that have seen it, you can kind of see how those characters mirror each other when a character is compulsive and they can't stop, and their actions always speak louder than their words. And sometimes in the case of Barry, the only way to stop him, we tried to stop him with jail time, prison time. That didn't work. Gene had to kill him. And that's where, let's take the pin out now. That's where I think the narrative is so fascinating, because to the audience, like I already said, Barry was the villain. So who was the hero? That would be Gene. Gene saved everyone from the chaos that Barry could bring into the future, right? He kind of saved him from Sally, saved him from how he could have affected his son as he got older. Because when we see that flash forward, they're doing fine. Sally's a teacher, his son's in high school, just living a normal life, being very, happy, healthy, regular. The rest goes on kind of thing. But in the narrative, it's completely backwards. Barry is the hero and how he is portrayed in the film, and Gene is the villain. And
Right.
I think that says more about how media, like that was I thought fascinating commentary about how media, and we still see this to this day, how Hollywood really manipulates the truth in historical events for their own entertainment purposes and to make money. Like what's going to work the best, instead of what's more important, the money and the power and the prestige, or the truth. And Hollywood seems to always go in one direction.
Yeah, and like the younger guy, that was the war hero. He's gonna typically be painted as the hero in a Hollywood film.
There's a propaganda element, I guess is what I'm hinting at. And we still see this in filmmakers and definitely Hollywood to this day. There's sometimes an agenda that they're hinting at or
Most
pushing.
times, I would say, most times. I think there's a lot of programming that goes on in Hollywood, and that could be time for another conversation. But,
Another day.
another day. But I have to argue a little bit again with
Oh,
your
please.
statement that Barry's the villain of the show, because
Oh,
is
why? Why do you disagree? I love a
I
little
don't
discourse.
know. I mean, that's the thing, like, I think that the way the show ended with that flip on Barry being the hero, I think the statement, and I could be wrong, that's why I say I don't know, the statement that maybe the writers were trying to make is that life is so ironic, and a lot of things are about perspective, and did they ever I mean, I'm just curious as if we got the whole of the writers today. Was he the villain? You know, like, or was he a victim? Was he a victim to war? Was he a
Mm.
and the way they presented the film, I think that was probably what you're saying with it was a Hollywood take on it, the irony, right? But were are they also trying to point out the irony of life?
But he still wouldn't be the hero then, right? He would still be the victim.
I don't know.
So if he's not the villain and he's not the hero, or if he's not the villain, sometimes yeah, we would want to paint him as the hero, just like they did in the film. But with your interpretation, he was a lot of a product of a circumstance and being a victim of yeah PTSD, going through the hell of war and the psychology that comes with it. And he should have been rehabbed properly, and that is maybe the true villain of the story is that he didn't get the treatment he so desperately deserved.
And I mean, I'm also not I'm not completely opposing the idea that he's the villain either. I think that in life or in writing and all this, like, it's all about your perspective. And I feel like as humans, one day we can feel villainous and sometimes we can feel heroic, and that's kind of what I loved about the show is that emotionally it I don't know. It just kind
Like
of
it
left a
mirrors I kind of like your interpretation of like we don't have to, do what I'm doing, which is like fine point, say this person's this thing,
right.
this person's that thing, that they can all be interchangeable depending on perspective, just like how it is in real life.
And typically in traditional drama, like, back in the I think it was Aristotle or whoever coined, like, there's always an antagonist and a protagonist in, like,
Mhm.
straight, square, like, the way but I think that's why people go back to what we are saying in the beginning, well, a lot of people didn't gel to the show is because I think it pushed the boundaries on what is what.
So then we will put the ball in the listener's court. What do you guys think? Do you think Barry is the villain or the victim or something else? We would love to hear from you. But before we do that, I think we need to give some love to the rest of the cast because this was still supported by the characters Monroe Fuchs, played by Stephen Root, of course Sally Reed, played by Sarah Goldberg, and I think everyone's probably sleeper hit favorite, NoHo Hank, the comedy relief through much of. Oh, there was a lot of comedy throughout it, but it was punctuated by NoHo Hank and his very silly take on a gangster played by Anthony Kerrigan. I don't want to spend too much time on someone like Fuchs. I do kind of there is a little bit of existentialism we could talk about like we did with someone like Barry and Gene Cousineau, because there was a part of me that's like, what was Fuchs looking for?
Mhm.
Everybody had some pretty logical arcs or very thought provoking arcs, and I only feel like I realized what he was looking for by the end. He was looking for himself, identity, and most importantly, in terms of Barry himself, because for you guys that may not know, this Fuchs was at one time like a mentor to Barry. He was essentially the manager. He would set up the deals, the hits, and then Barry would carry them out. And when that relationship was tarnished, I thought for a lot of his character arcs, I thought for a long time, he was just looking for like an apology
Mhm.
and to be forgiven. Until probably close, pretty much the last episode where I realized, oh, he's also looking for himself.
Yeah, that was very prominent with was it The Raven?
Yeah.
That was great though.
Well, what's great about him becoming the Raven is, this was NoHo Hank like just making up bullshit to the cops, being like, "Oh yeah, the person that did this was an assassin named the Raven,"
Oh,
and
no,
it was
Hank
just
came
made
up.
up. Yeah, it was made up nonsense.
Oh, I
And
forgot that.
then
Okay.
and then Fuchs like kind of found out about this Raven moniker and he just kind of took it. But then it was crazy to see how like of a badass he became
Yeah, yeah.
because he really did become the Raven in a way.
Yes. He, like, rose up from the ashes of, like, getting his ass beat in jail, like, every other day, and it really hardened him, and I have to say Stephen Root is a phenomenal actor. I'm a huge
He's
fan.
such like a talk about a character actor.
Yeah.
Like he can play any kind of guy like this, like
Ye
so well too.
and he's just so honest. I love his I don't know, he's great.
Yeah, just to think like, this was the guy from Office Space and I believe he was in Talk Radio,
Talk
and
radio.
that's a deep
Yeah.
fucking cut right there.
Oh, that shit's
And
awesome.
yeah, and to see him just kind of, he's kind of been in and out of movies and television. Like he's had a very wide-ranging career and it's like only getting better. And he's more of a veteran where someone like Sarah Goldberg is a little more new, who played
Mhm.
Sally Reed, Barry's love interest on the show. And at first, I thought she was like, oh, at the beginning, like the first season, I'm like, anybody could fucking play
Mhm.
Sally Reed. But by the end, again,
Wow, yeah.
she was
Holy
bringing
shit.
it.
Unbelievable. She actually studied at London Academy of Dramatic Art,
Ooh, I
so
didn't know that.
she is no joke. I mean, she's got some major training under her belt, and she's a legit actress, so I'm a huge fan now.
I'm a huge fan. Like when
Yeah.
she would do those like screaming outbursts, I was like, whoa,
Oh my
whoa.
god, and you can just, like, feel, like, the instability, like, coming through the TV. You're like, "Oh,
Yeah,
this is
like
so
it
good."
reverberated kind of thing. And last but not least, everyone's favorite comedy relief, NoHo Hank, played by Anthony Carrigan. This was probably the hardest arc to really think about. I was like, what did Hank want? And
Uh,
then, we saw poignant glimmers of that near the end. He wanted security and he wanted to feel safe and he wanted to be in a stable relationship with his partner. But as much as he wasn't as fleshed out as the other characters we've already talked about, he really became very, very three-dimensional, I think, at the end again. That season 4, I feel like really not only tied up so many loose ends, it really made the cast three-dimensional on a brand new level. And because as much as he wanted those things, security to feel safe, stable relationship with his partner, we realized that his empire was more important.
mhm.
That he went ahead and killed his partner to maintain the stability of his empire.
Did he kill see, I was talking to a friend of mine who one of my friends that actually watched the show, and we were talking about that scene, and she's like, "Yeah, and he killed, Cristobal," and I'm like, "No, he didn't. He didn't kill
He
Cristobal."
ordered the hit, is how I
But how do we
understand it.
know? Oh, I probably missed some of that.
He ordered he didn't personally kill him, no. I think he called his goons, his fellow gangsters to actually do it. There's no way NoHo Hank could actually kill
No,
Cristobal.
I know, but, like, from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, they got into the argument, and then he's like, "I gotta leave, I can't be with you
Yeah,
anymore,"
I
'cause I'm
can't do this anymore. He tries to leave and he's like warning him. He's like, "No, like you know too much. Like this is going to end bad." And yeah, I guess how I interpreted it, I guess it may come down to that again. I feel like he felt like he had no choice. That's how I looked at it. Like he ordered the hit, but of course his goons, his minions carried it out because that would have destroyed everything that he helped build.
Yeah, but I thought yeah, I just didn't know. I guess it doesn't matter.
I think what's more important, don't get bogged down in those details. I think what was more important and more poignant to me was the reality that he himself couldn't face that reality.
Mhm.
That he because Fuchs at the end was like, I will, new deal. I'll walk away right now if you can just admit that you killed your partner. And then he has a breakdown, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because I think that, regardless of how it's done, with what you're talking about, regardless of how he still feels responsible, and he couldn't, when he was forced to face it, that was essentially the beginning of his own demise.
Yeah, he was starting to crumble.
And that's when the firefight broke out. Like he's like, "No deal, you're a liar," and then Fuchs shoots him.
Do you think that was a form of suicide for Hank? I mean, yeah, Hank.
Ooh, I don't think so. I think Hank still wanted his empire. He still wanted what he built. He still wanted his fancy fucking green suits
Oh
and
my god, awesome.
uh
Love it.
his long chain hats. And and yeah, no, I think he still wanted that stuff. I don't he probably didn't think that Fuchs is going to pull out a gun right then and there, especially because they had guns on each, they had a whole team of gangsters on either side with guns out. Like he knew
Mhm.
that this was going to start a huge firefight, and it did.
And one more comment about Hank. I think if you're talking about Greek drama, which we're not, but I mentioned it before, he kind of is like the clown. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah.
Like there's an element of him that's like every time you see him, like he's got these bright outfits on and he's just jovial. And of course, in the end, that wasn't the case. But
I loved how he was played.
yeah,
He was like, he's a cool dude,
I've never
he's
seen that's good. I've never seen Anthony Kerrigan in anything else. I have to follow him a little bit. He was
I
great.
yeah, I think this I he's from what I've researched, he's been in and out of the industry for a while, but this was like, his a big starring role, like a almost like a breakthrough, where I
Mhm.
I think we'll be seeing a lot more of Anthony
Oh, yeah.
Kerrigan.
Absolutely.
And it's fun. I actually urge you to just look up like an interview with him, like on, a
Mhm.
late night show, because if he's American, he sounds just like us. And it's funny because you get so used to that fake Chechen accent he does
Yes. He did
that you just
great.
think he just sounds like that all the time, and you're like, oh, this guy's an actor. He's actually American and sounds nothing like it. And it kind of like I always liken it to the first time I saw a Game of Thrones character in regular clothing, like out of character, like
Ah,
on
yeah.
Fallon or something. I'm like, oh God, they're a real person in real life. That just
That's
feels
when you know
weird.
the show's good or the actor's good. It just really pulls you into that reality.
Exactly. And I don't want to spend a ton of time talking about some of the ins and outs of filmmaking, but I would do the show a little bit of a disservice if we didn't touch on some of the things, and that includes direction, cinematography, editing, pacing, and of course, music. So the glue that makes any television or film come together is all those little pieces besides the story and the characters, though the latter was much more important for a show like this. But the direction was, I think it was subtle, and I think it was more complicated than we realize. There was a lot of long held shots, and this is probably more because of Bill Hader's style of directing, where we would just kind of hold, and that would make you really have to face the emotion that was, like it would never cut away from Sally having a breakdown or him having a breakdown,
Yep.
or things like that. We were face to face with it, and that's a direction choice, of course. And then of course just the look of the show, cinematography, it looked, I think, again, there's so many times like I felt like it looked kind of, medium, just like so in the middle, but I think we don't realize how much more thought and pre-thought went into blocking these scenes and making it look the way it looked. Especially again, season 4, I think, really brought it together with the artistic value and integrity of seeing like his son running, past a sunset, and like choosing it to be that way versus the other things. And there's so many times like I couldn't tell, like, is this going on in their head? Is this really, especially like with Sally and like that man in the black
Yes.
outfit,
Oh my
like
god.
is this real? Is this going on in her head? Like what is, how are things beginning? Where does something begin and the other thing end?
And yeah, that whole the episode before, I guess it's the last episode before season 4, left me hanging, not knowing, was this a dream or was this a fantasy? Because
Yeah.
they all of a sudden were 7 years ahead in a desert with the sun, but the episode before, she goes into her apartment and he's escaped from jail, and she goes, "Barry, let's go." We don't know if she meant, "Let's go to jail? I'm take turning you in?"
Yeah, when they did the time jump, I think I definitely felt that way. I bet all of the audience felt that
Mhm.
way, like, "Wait, what just happened?
Yep.
Like, where are we? Who is this person?" And then we later find, we find out the truth. And that's probably where the editing and the pacing comes in, where I felt like it was always entertain like, I feel like there was never anything that it never dragged.
Mm-mm.
It never felt rushed either, though, too.
No.
I felt like the 4 seasons was like a perfectly encapsulated the story they were trying to tell with these characters. I felt satisfied, by the end. So let's tie a bow on this bee, and Miss Marie, tell the good people why they need to check out Barry. God damn it!
'Cause it's awesome, man. Um,
That's it. Okay, see you next week.
that's
It's awesome, man. No,
it's at like, kind of if you touch on a little bit of everything we said, it's entertaining, it makes you think, but not I don't think too much. The acting's phenomenal, the writing's phenomenal, and it keeps you hanging off the edge of your seat.
and it still has that artistic value too.
Yeah.
Like, where if you want to look for these little things, you can. But like, just like Marie said, guys, if you want to just see a fun, story, fun, weird hitman romp, this is the show for you too.
Yeah.
Like, you can still tune out, I think.
And if you like acting, I think that they really embodied the
Yeah, some master classes here.
Yeah, I think I mean, the actors were awesome, the writing allowed the characters you were able to see their vulnerability because they all had flaws, but it's a beautiful thing, and maybe the average moviegoer doesn't give a shit, but I thought that was
They don't,
yeah,
but
you're right, they don't.
but our people will love it. I think, that's the beauty of comedy, though. Going back to that, remember, I build this show at the top of our show as a dark comedy. I think that is the thing that will still, even if you're a lay watcher or lay listener or whatever you are, you don't want the challenging stuff. You don't want the hard to comprehend or stuff or the opposite stuff you have to analyze. You don't with this too.
Mm-mm,
You can just have fun. You
right.
can sit down. It's still a comedy. Even though it has evolved, it was the emphasis was on comedy at the beginning. There's still comedy at the end. It's just the emphasis is now a little more veered towards the drama and tying up all these characters' loose ends and their arcs and come bring the story to a close, which they did masterfully. And that's Barry.
Yeah, that's what makes it so brilliant.
Check it out, the show on HBO or now Max. Barry. Thank you for listening. I want to thank my guest, of course, Miss Marie Parsons, for joining us today. But before we go, we got a little extra for you, a little icing on the cake, a little cherry on top with what we call the gem of the week. Before we talk gems, let's talk their sponsors. Today's gems are brought to you by Zencaster. Zencaster is our go-to tool for remote podcast recordings. What's great is that you can record separate audio and video tracks, and it's all backed up on a secured cloud, so you never lose your hard work. Even better, it's easy to use, and there's nothing to download. So go to zen.ai, that's zen.ai/art of the beholder, or just use promo code art of the beholder and get 30% off your first 3 months with the pro account. Now back to the gems. Mine is another television show. I have been hearing about What We Do in the Shadows for so long. As
Oh.
yeah, as a lover of more sitcom kind of comedy shows, like network comedy shows, like in the vein of The Office or Parks and Rec, if you like those shows, you're gonna love What We Do in the Shadows. It's essentially The Office with vampires.
Mhm.
Check it out.
I have an artist, a musical artist. His name is King, King Krule,
I know
Krule.
King
Oh,
Cruel.
okay,
Yeah,
great.
tell us about him.
Well, he's been around since about 2010. I think he was about 16 when he started. He's from England, and I thought of him because I'm actually going to see him in Atlanta, the first week in September because
Nice.
he really was just touring Europe forever, and now he's finally here. I guess he's gotten big enough, but his genres, I guess, are indie rock, jazz fusion, post-punk, hip hop sort of stuff. And he's got this like raspy, like punkish. You know his stuff, but I think he's awesome.
Guys, check it out. And if you like that, you can always follow us at novodayproductions.com. You can also check us out at _Novo_day and days DE and at Nova Day Media. Don't forget to like, subscribe, do all the things. You know what to do. We don't have to tell you. You know, it's fucking etiquette by now. You know what to do. And if you'd like to sponsor our little love child or be on the show, you can reach out to us at novadaymedia@gmail.com. So until next time, we'll see you in the next one. So be good to each other. And as always, good luck and Godspeed. We love you.
Art of the Beholder is brought to you by Novo Day Productions. Created and hosted by Novo Day and the Novo Day Collective. Facebook.com/Novo Day Media, at Novo Day Media on Twitter and Instagram. Music by A Company. Facebook.com/ACoMusic123. ACO on Spotify. Logo design by Tom Justice, JESTUS, of thejusticecompany.com. And executively produced by Clayton Anderson. All rights reserved.